Greetings, I'm Carrington McDuffie. This is Star Seeds of Freedom, and today we're going to continue our discussion with Senator Dennis Linthicum, a state senator out of Oregon, on the subject of the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy. And why do they keep pushing the idea of a democracy when that isn't actually how this country was founded or what it was intended to be? As for this flag, well, it's a 48-star flag, and it's the flag that was sent to my grandparents in place of the body of their son, my Uncle Robert, who's buried in France, World War II. The reason I'm standing in front of it is I carry the spirit of my uncle. I can feel his energy as I produce these shows, and this is all I have of him. I've seen a few photographs. So I bring his energy. One of the people who fought in a war that was financed by the globalists, as they almost all are, all the wars. So today we're going to talk about what the globalists are trying to do and how we are not having it. Senator Linthicum, welcome back to Star Seeds of Freedom. It's really awesome to have you back discussing with me the things that we really like to talk about. And I know that you've got an extremely busy week and even month, and I really appreciate you setting aside the time to be here with me. Things are hopping in Oregon. I know you've been down on the mat, I believe.
Right. Oregon faces the same problem. Actually, it's kind of global in effect. It's the top-down governance model where the people who have power, one, they enjoy their power. Two, their power is enriching to their own personal lives, their business ventures, their nation states, whatever. And so they want to continue to push that power onto the people at large. If you look at Europe, you see Germany and the farmers in France and Germany and Austria, the Netherlands, they're all mad as hornets. And, you have to thank God that people are willing to stand up for their God-given rights. Government doesn't have any God-given rights. People do. And this is important for people to recognize and understand.
That's perfectly put. It's the people that have the God-given rights. Government is just a structure. It's not. It's turned into the state, and it's turned into the Borg, and that's kind of what we're dealing with. And what I was wanting to speak with you about today, and I was hoping that you would maybe hold forth on this a little bit, and I know you're really good at that, and I love that, is the difference, what's happened to the government and to the whole situation that we're in governmentally in the United States. I'll just speak for the USA right now, which was founded as a constitutional republic, but is turned into not that anymore, and there's a lot of talk about our democracy. I hear this even from people who know better.
Right.
There's a big difference between a republic, especially constitutional republic, and a democracy, and a lot of people don't really know what that means. It's my contention that we've been fed a lot of propaganda about this being a democracy by it being repeated over and over and over, Goebbels style. Which runs completely against the principles on which this country was founded, because a democracy is about collectivism, right? And a republic is about individual rights. And there's a huge, huge difference between these two things. Seems to me that collectivism, socialism, winds up in socialism eventually, that democracy leads to socialism. And socialism is just the enacted form of the ideal of communism, which I'm pretty sure is basically fascism. So that's my opening statement about that. I'd really like our listeners to hear what you have to say about what a republic really is from the point of view of someone who's participating directly in government and what we're actually dealing with.
Yeah, well, good. Thank you for the opportunity. There's a couple of things that I'll kind of set out right away. Is the turbulence and follies of democracy were well known to our founders. They were aware of the danger of democracy, and they often, the anti-federalists referred to democracy as mob rule.
Yes.
And the reason it's mob rule is it's, the vast majority of the loudest voices gets the sway of the argument. Yeah. And it doesn't mean they're right. It just means they have the loudest voice.
Yeah.
And Madison wrote about this in a letter to Jefferson. He says, wherever the real power of government lies, there is a danger of oppression. And this is a good whenever or wherever clause. It says, look at, if there's power, we know from, it was Lord Acton, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Madison, recognizing that same power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, said wherever the real power is, there's a danger of oppression. And then he continues on, in our government, the real power lies with the majority of the community. And the invasion of private rights is chiefly to be apprehended. In other words, to be stolen from your private rights will be stolen from you by acts of the government contrary to the sense of its constituents. In other words, this will be, the people won't like the fact that their rights are being taken, but government, he says, and then he warns us, this real problem is government is merely exercising the power of the simple majority wherever that is in the legislature. So that in my state, the Democrat majority is got absolute power. They have the House, they have the Senate at the state level in Oregon, and they have the governor's office, and they have the Secretary of State, and they have the Attorney General, and it goes on and on and on. And so this power is wielded by this favored party, and it's destructive to all the other constituents on the street.
And what you're saying too points me to the question of why we have to have parties at all in the first place, because that does solidify control. As soon as you do that, you're dividing, right? Divided we fall, and that isn't part necessarily. That's not part of a republic. It, in fact, was warned against by, I think, Madison or Jefferson, or both of them. Parties lead to factiousness, and that's exactly what we have. And while behind the scenes, they actually, as we know, are agreeing and making deals, and they don't have any morality anyway. And you wind up in this duality consciousness, which is what we have here, and which is what the human, I think, consciousness is trying to move out of and away from duality consciousness. We're trying to bring both sides of the brain together. Even Putin talked about this in his interview with Tucker Carlson recently, the two halves of the brain. And that's what's going on here, and what you're fighting in the Oregon Senate with this majority, and you're fighting from, the minority of the Republican Party. But I just wonder, what would it look like without any parties at all? Why do we have to have parties? Because it just consolidates control. That's how it seems to me. Now, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I wanted to bring that in and not forget, because I think it's part of the whole question of how the government should be structured to the best of to our advantage.
Yeah, and so this is part of the party construct, is part of the notion of a republic. And I started talking about the danger of single point authority and rule authoritarianism, totalitarianism, et cetera. And what we didn't do is we didn't really define well a republic. And a republic looks very much like a democracy in terms of its representative governance. As you spoke when we started the program, the United States is a constitutionally federated republic. And what that means is we wrote out the rules ahead of time. So like our basketball court is just a wooden, parquet floor. And somebody went out there and drew the lines on the basketball court. We know where out of bounds is. We know what's in bounds. We know where the key is. We know where the half point line is. We mapped out all the rules and we painted them on the floor. You've got to play by these rules.
Yeah.
And that's what the Constitution is. The Constitution is the documentation that says, here's the rules, guys, ready, hut, go, and that's what we're going to play by. And then in that representative form of government, there's jurisdictional boundaries, so that the 13 colonies thought themselves not as citizens of the United States. That didn't come until after years and years of machinations and factions developing and seeking of power. Originally, those 13 states were free and independent states. In the unanimous declaration of the 13 states, i.e. the Declaration of Independence, the 13 unanimous states are lowercase. Actually, the states is uppercase. The unanimous is lowercase.
Right.
To designate that it's not a giant big nation. That it's all these individual states that have been federated, a confederated tribe of states, and will work together for the common good. But there is no federal national authority.
Right.
And so that's what a republic is, so that you have state government, you have county governments, you have parish governments in some southern states, you have municipal governments, you have regional governments, you have regional districts, you have taxing districts, road districts, public safety, districts or park districts. All of these regional authorities govern their own little piece of the pie, and it was never meant to get consolidated into one mischievous aristocracy, which is what we're seeing today.
Yes, exactly. And it seems to me one of the ways that's happened is by pushing this idea of democracy, so that people think of the mob rule, what was called mob rule, as a good thing. And this consolidation of control, this centralization, I think, is a really good way to put it. And this was as a good thing, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work to anyone's advantage except for those at the top, and you have a top-down system, right?
Right.
So, and I think it's confusing.
It is confusing. One of the best authors was from the 1800s. Actually, he wrote a lot in the I should have said 18th century, from the 1760s to the 1790s or whatever. Was William Paley. He was a British kind of a utilitarian type of author, a guy who was just walking through the practical aspects of what government looks like. And he has a chapter on the different forms of government. And one of the things he notes, for example, despotism is an absolute monarchy where all of the legislative power is in a single person.
Yeah.
And you can think of that as King George III. Yeah. He was the guy, and it was his say or the highway. I mean, he was the guy in charge.
Yeah.
And then he outlines an aristocracy as where the legislators are a select assembly. They're the rich guys, etc. And they use their power, their inheritance, their property, their tenure, their land holdings, and all of those kinds of things to qualify them to have the right to rule, and that would be, kind of a feudalistic perspective. And then he lumps a republic and a democracy into the same category, where the people at large, either collectively or by representation, this is the key to the monarchy, constitute the legislature. And this is where we should be today, but aren't quite. And then he talks about the advantages of a republic and the disadvantages, the evils of a republic. He just nails it. The advantages of the republic are liberty. Yay, that's what we're fighting for.
Yes.
Exemption from needless restrictions, i.e., fewer regulations, less control over your private life.
Yes.
Get these guys out of your life, and you should have the ability to do as you please. And then laws that get applied equally. He says equal laws, regulations adapted to the wants and circumstances of the people, and frugality. Well, there's something the current legislative bodies, both in the state of Oregon, probably Texas, and the federal level, they've missed out on frugality big time.
Don't know nobody knows anything about that. And that gets back to paper money. I mean, that gets back to fiat currency and how it allows us to just skip right over frugality and get deep into debt and all the evils of that, right? I mean, that's one of the things that
right. And the evil side of this is that Paley notes is the same that happens in quote, a pure democracy, the mob rule. He calls it the confusion, the rage, the clamor, the inevitable consequence of assembling multitudes of people. This is Antifa in downtown Portland. I don't know if Antifa came to Austin or not, but in Portland, they caused $2 billion in damages.
Yeah, that was planned. I mean, that's, a planned breakdown. But right, so Paley, I will put in the show notes how people can find Paley, because how he outlines it is really concise. And also I wanted to say that's backed up by Murry Rothbard, who's an Austrian economist, free market economist, 20th century, talks about the difference between equality of rights, which is an equality under the law, and what democracy starts to demand, which is an equality of results, an equality of outcome, rather than the rights themselves, because that's where it becomes impossible. That's where you try to control everything. That's where you get into socialism, and you try to control all the results. So equal distribution of property and all that stuff that leads to what they're trying to do right now. So I think that's one of the issues with democracy that's really dangerous, that it's sort of a fine point, but it's a crucial point, the difference between equal rights and equal outcome. Because there can't be an equal same outcome for everyone, because we're unique. We're unique individuals. Right. And that gets back to individual rights as opposed to collectivism. And without you can't have individual rights without property rights. Right. And you get into socialism, you start getting further and further from property rights. And then you're just really under the thumb of the state. And the power or the control, I like to say, is really hyper centralized. So, it's another version of a feudal system, it seems to me.
Right. And I think this is a little bit of the degeneration of our thought life, our skill in reading. You reference Rothbard, and he, in his book Conceived in Liberty, is where he talks about equality of rights, and is really an important feature. We today, everyone's claiming to be, quote, unique. And in fact, you could be a unique gender, and you could be a unique, furry, and you could be and that's not really what he had in mind in terms of unique. He meant if you were in a grocery store, even if you had a twin with you on aisle 6, you would never find another person with your skill set, at your height, your weight, your skill, your fingerprints, your mental acuity, your math skill, your English skills, your love of writing, or your musical talent. no one in that store is your equal. And yet the government types, to make their job easy, the political class wants to pretend they can grant equality to you. They can't. It's impossible.
Exactly.
And by them to grant equality to all of you, they have to take power from you to perform your music and from me to write my newsletters. And as soon as they do, because they want both of us to be equally bad at writing and music and cooking and raising our children. And as soon as we give them that power, when we have those unique skills to each of us as individuals, uniquely created beings, we've lost the game, and they've taken our property straight out from under us.
Yes. Yes. I think the uniqueness, everything that you described, everything you enumerated, we could say it comes down to a soul. That's one way of looking at it, or just, sort of shorthand that each soul is unique. And so, yeah, they don't have, they being whoever gets into that position of power, it's not theirs to give. And I see sometimes, oh, I don't know, social media, or I guess really, about being our rights being spoken about as if they were permissions. And this is completely as if they were permissions granted by the government. That's not what they are. We bring the rights. We are the rights. So we give government permission to govern. That's how that's supposed to work. So it's gotten completely flipped around. And I guess, wanting to return to democracy versus republic, and we don't have to obviously narrow our conversation to only that, but so how does that come into play? I mean, in what ways does a constitutional republic help keep that flip from happening? Where who has actual permission? It's the government who has permission from us. Is it because
Right.
of that multi-layered structure of the government? You were talking about parish, county, etc.
Yeah, that's it exactly. There's two facets to it. One, the rules are painted on the floor.
Right.
What we have happening today, for example, with our unsound money, fiat currency et al., is you've got people violating the rules of consciousness, prudence, and frugality. You in your family life, as well as I and mine, and everybody on the street has to live within the boundaries. They earn so much money. That means they can only spend so much money. Maybe they could borrow so much, but they can't borrow more than that because the people who are lending money realize, well, they can't pay it back. They've got to follow the rules, and they owe us 5% a year, 6%, and that kind of thing is going on. We're following the rules, and the rules are laid down in the borrowing contract. The rules are laid down in your employment contract. The rules are laid down when you sell a album, and all of these things are rule based. We've got them painted on the floor. Now all of a sudden the federal government says, to heck with the rules. Parents who care about their children's education in the state of Oregon are now labeled domestic terrorists because they're interfering with our being this board of education at the state level. They're interfering with our desire to influence your children in the ways of democracy. And parents are saying, no, I want to teach about republics. I want to teach about their natural rights. They're not God-given, they're not state-given rights. They're
Right.
not federal government donated rights. They're God-given natural rights because I am a human person. I'm a unique individual. I'm a created soul, as you referred to us, and therefore the rights belong to me before government ever even got built on the street corner.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I wanted to say about the rules, I mean, those are really agreements at their best, I mean,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
and what we've been dealing with the World Economic Forum and the globalists is this whole rules-based world order, which runs completely counter to all natural rights. So so we do have those rules laid out as in the basketball game and on the court and on the paint. But
Well, here's make sure your listeners catch this. We made the rule book ahead of time
yeah,
and it painted on the floor. And that's the rules we're supposed to follow. The 10 Commandments, for example, your Fourth Amendment, your First Amendment, your Second Amendment rights, those are painted on the floor. And yet the government thinks they can change your Second Amendment rights. They can change your Fourth Amendment. They can spy on you. They can take your goods, your material. They can search you without warrant. In other words, without cause.
yeah,
And they think, well, because we changed the rule book, it's now valid. But that's artificial. They actually just dump black paint on the floor, and you
yeah.
can't tell where inbounds and outbounds is anymore. And they say, well, since you can't see the lines, we're free to navigate up into the bleachers to take your wallet from you while you're watching the ball game.
Right, right. No, that's so true. And the way that those rules were originally made, again, agreements because they arise out of natural rights. And for those listeners who maybe don't believe in a God or experience that divine thing, um, think of them as natural rights. Either way, it's fine, but it's growing out of it's hard to even talk about it because it comes before words, right? Natural
Right.
rights come before words, and then the agreements that are made into rules that are laid down come out of those natural rights. That's what the Declaration of Independence is all about. And if you read any of the Federalist papers, really, they're full of that. Madison writes, and I forget which one it is, which piece it is. He writes about this very issue of what rights actually really are. That the fact that we have to delineate them denotes that we are dealing with those who want to take control.
Right,
You
right.
know,
And Jefferson was the Republican. Everyone says Lincoln's the first Republican president, and I always disagree with that category because Jefferson was the Republican who forced the Bill of Rights to show up as the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. He wasn't part of the Republican Party, which didn't come along until Lincoln. So that's why the Republican Party likes to point to Lincoln. But I like the principle involved in Jefferson being a Republican who was fighting for the Bill of Rights, where they added significant libertarian ideas
yes,
to the constitutional form of government by preventing the government, i.e., Congress shall make no law, and preventing Congress from intervening or inserting itself into all these natural rights that you carry as an individual.
yes, and those rights and what's delineated is really very simple. I mean, the
Yeah.
best government is a very simple one, and I think we touched on this when we spoke last, that the duties of the government or the obligations of the government are very few. I mean, it's maybe 25, you tell me. It's not, it's very small. There's supposed to be a post office, they're supposed to guard our borders. It's really not a whole lot. The rest is up to us.
Wouldn't you bring up the guard your border thing? Oh my gosh, you're going to
I
get all
know.
kinds of mail.
That's yeah. That's so complex. There's so many layers to that, and there's so many stories to that. I kind of don't really want to go down that road. That's a different conversation, so we may have to schedule another conversation for that because that's so
Yeah, yeah,
multifaceted and it's touchy, but it's crucial to what everything that's going on now because without borders you don't have a country, and that's the whole idea, right? They don't want us to even
right.
have a country because it's a globalist thing that's going on. But as far as like a republic, the government is supposed to be very small and very simple, which is brilliant.
And there's really a enormous beauty to small control. Republicans were a minority in Oregon, and so, but we're always arguing for local control. And the zone of local control is, you know what, your municipality should be able to make rules they want to make, and they shouldn't have to be kowtowing to the state or to a regional government or to the federal government even. Remember, it was Jefferson who wanted, he thought it would be better to have thousands of small cities versus the megalopolis.
Yes.
And that giant city is this giant form of control. Everybody's in the waste management district, everybody's in the sewer district, everybody's in the municipal water district, everybody's in the police district, everybody's on and on it goes. And it's like, that means it's all coming from one source, and that they tax you for public safety and for waste management and for sewage are just different areas to suck money out of your wallet. And everybody realizes, like, oftentimes it would, in a suburban neighborhood, you would hate for everybody to have to drill a well. Sure enough, let's drill one well and let's share the water resources. That's perfectly legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, there has to be water district boundaries for those outlays for that management. And at some point, why is it that I can't drive down the street with my pickup truck and clean up all the garbage? When New York has a garbage strike and they're not picking up the trash, why couldn't I drive down Main Street with my pickup truck and put all that garbage in and take it to the transfer station and dump it and come back for another run? And I could do that all day long, and businesses would be more than happy to pay for my service. But you can't do that because it's a franchise that's been gifted to the waste management district, and you're not allowed to, put 1 foot into that zone, take a milk carton and go throw it away. You can't do it. It's against the law. So what happens is garbage stacks up, the rats infiltrate, the streets, and we applaud because our local city council has absolute control. This is nuts. It's contrary to everything you and I know and believe, and the common man too. Yeah. Everybody on Main Street knows this is a silly way of doing business.
Yes, that's a great analogy for the whole situation. And I don't know if you were referring to DC, Washington, DC, which isn't even a city. It's its whole own, duchy, basically, as is the City of London and the Vatican. Those are the 3 power centers of the world, right? The military, the financial, and the religious control centers. That's a great analogy for what happens. And then we don't have control over our own lives, and we're also not able to exercise our skills and our gifts. It's a way of suppressing our very potential.
Yeah.
Your potential to get in your pickup truck and drive down the road and pick up trash, or, that's a suppression of your gift that you have to offer everybody.
That's a beautiful point, because I have a skill set, and I could use that for the betterment of mankind, for my neighbors, right? Yeah. And they could reward me, 25 cents for every, trash bag I pick up, or $3 for every day. Their free market preference for buying my service I should be able to do that. And yet, because of this kind of top-down control, you cannot. It's against the law.
It's against the law. And the reason...
Go ahead.
Well, I think the reason it is, ultimately, if you really dig down, the reason for that control... Okay, so if you were able to get your pickup truck and make a run down the street and pick up all the trash, and everyone waves to you from the door and says, "Awesome, thank you, Dennis, thank you," then what happens there is, as a community, we interweave, and we're interdependent, and we're independent, but we're helping each other at the same time, and we create a really strong community fabric. They don't want that. They don't want
Right.
that. People who
Well,
want to be at the top don't want that strong interwoven community fabric where we give and receive. It's a really
it,
basic tenet of life. They
You
want to
you
suppress
you
that.
make you paint a beautiful picture because not only could I go down the street and have people appreciate me, and I would appreciate that they rewarded me. Here's a buck, here's $2, here's $5, whatever it looked like, and I could hire. Hey, Joe, can you help? Frida, would you like to help? And I could then hire those people and we could do twice as much, twice as fast or something. And I could pay them commensurate with, this relationship and this camaraderie and this societal community development.
Yeah.
But the government has stepped in. In Oregon, the minimum wage is $16 an hour. So now I've got to calculate in my head, and I've got employment tax, and I've got paid family leave, and I've got health insurance requirements, and I've got all these things. And it's like, I'm not going to get into this mess. I can't even begin to hire individuals to help me in my little adventure. And yesterday, speaking of this minimum wage, yesterday there was a Steve Garvey interview of some variety, and one of the Democrats, he was debating with regard to, and you probably saw this, with regard to the governor opportunity to run for the state senator. I said governor, but state senator Steve Garvey, the former first baseman,
Yes.
U.S. senator for the state of California. The individual, one of the Democrats, said, "I'm hoping to raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour." And when you think about that, $50 an hour, like who will ever be able to afford a hamburger coming off of this guy's, griddle? You just demolished the entire market economy. If
Yes.
$50 an hour is the low end of the scale, it's because these people deserve a wage that is commensurate with their humanity. And it's like, well, wait, you missed the point that Madison was making. Madison et al., the founders, were talking about equal opportunity. You can go
Yes.
cook burgers all day long, but I can't guarantee people are going to love your burgers.
Right.
If you're putting too much jalapeno in your burgers, then I'm putting just the right amount in mine.
Mm-hmm.
People buy mine over yours. And then all of a sudden people will go, "Hey, have you seen Carrington's burgers? They're fabulous. They're spicy as all get out. Let's go to Carrington's." And they'll run over to your place. And this is the unique, we talked earlier about our
Yes.
unique, our preferences, our likes, our dislikes. And all of a sudden you have a lineup outside of your place because people are loving the way you're making your burgers. And by golly, I've got a lineup of all the individuals who happen to like, my style of
Yeah.
burger. There's nothing in the world wrong with this, and we should cherish this kind of productivity and free market economy.
Absolutely. This is where creativity lies, and what is
Yeah.
being right, and what's being suppressed is our creativity, which makes everyone really depressed. And there's all kinds of creativity. Doesn't necessarily mean being able to do an oil painting. It could be making a hamburger, whatever, but it's your creative act, and they would like control over all of that. And that's back also to that equality of outcome, equality of result that they try to control. So if you impose a minimum wage, and I actually think a minimum wage is a really bad idea, and some people are going to maybe send me angry letters or whatever, but the
Well,
reason for that being,
Well, wait, just let's explore just what you mentioned about your creativity and
Okay.
you value your contribution. If you and I both make $50 and I sit around on my backside all day and you're working hard, flipping burgers, making tacos or whatever, and I'm in the back room smoking a cigarette, what makes me deserve $50 an hour, and you deserve the same pay for far more work. And
Right.
so all of a sudden we've this is the point. It's equal outcome,
Yeah.
but not equal opportunity and not equal performance and not equal skill and not equal value.
Right.
And so the government controlled, you each get $50. And so we walk away thinking, oh, we're wealthy now, but you put in a lot of labor and I goofed off. And then pretty soon you're going to realize, hey, I should sit around like Dennis and I'll make the same $50. I can read that book I've always wanted to finish and never got to the last chapter. And all of a sudden, you've been disincentivized, you've been demotivated, you're
Mm-hmm.
now at the lowest point in your attainment of skills and initiative. And the state is applauding because they gave everybody the same $50. It's a horrible system.
It really is. It really is. And what you say about disincentivizing is absolutely right. And that's what happened during the lockdowns with all the free fake money that they handed out. And then a lot of people are like, well, why should I work? And not that I think everyone should be a workaholic, and I think the work week that we have in this country is insane, but still, another reason that I think the minimum wage doesn't work really is that, okay, so let's say you're a high school student and you're just coming into the market, the workplace, and you're just learning. It should be possible for an employer to hire you at an opening wage, at whatever, wage you show merit for, experience for, and then as your skills grow, then you get your raise, or if you don't get it, you go to someone who is offering a better wage for what it is that you deserve. Now, it's not perfect. Of course, that's not a perfect system, and there are going to be injustices and so on. But anytime that you try to enforce a structure like that, it always winds up suppressing creativity and community, that interweaving that I keep, thinking of as maybe I'm idealizing it, but I have experienced it. I've experienced it in a neighborhood situation and, smaller community situations and community of musicians. Um,
Right.
as a musician, you learn that. It's one reason that kids should be taught music, whether you're ever going to be anyone who plays a freaking clarinet or whatever, doesn't really matter. There are so many things you're learning from that. And one thing that you do learn from it that is the point relevant here is how instruments play together, to
Right,
create,
right.
right? Um, and so I just feel like we're getting separated by this kind of, we're getting suppressed and separated. So no
Well,
one,
and to follow your example, let's just play it out for your listeners so that they see how this works. Here's a young boy, 15, 16-year-old. He gets off the school bus. He's got 5 blocks to walk till he gets home. As he walks that 5 blocks, he sees windows that are dirty, fingerprints, smudges, whatever, and he could offer to get his bucket and his rag and come back and clean each of those windows. $2, I'll do your windows, or
right?
50 cents a day. I'll keep them clean all week. I'll make $2.50 on the 5 days I walk home from the bus. And he could use his time, appropriately. He could clean the windows for $2.50 a day for each little store that he stops out. And he would be contributing. They'd say hi, they'd say thank you, they'd say bye, they'd say here's your $2.50. And that's against the law. He cannot engage in that employment opportunity because it's against the law. The employer would have to hire him, pay his wages, collect his unemployment taxes, right? That's the first thing they do is they become a tax collector.
Yes.
Pay his vacation, pay his health care, and also his paid family leave and all these other things that the employer is going to get saddled with.
Yeah.
And the kid just wanted to walk by,
Yes.
spend 10 minutes washing a window with a pocket rag and some fresh water, and get to home and collect 15 bucks every
Right.
time you walk that route every day or every week in my example. And he would be wealthier, he'd be richer, he'd have more friends, he would be part of the community. People would applaud his hard work, his motivation, his effort, his creativity.
Yeah.
And the government, your local city and county officials, state officials, whoever it is, have said, no, that's against the law. And when you think of it in light of this, it's a crime. The federal government, the state government, the municipal government, they are committing crimes against the kids in our own neighborhood.
Yes, I absolutely. And that's the basis of a market economy, because then the windows are clear and people walk by and they can see the goods in the windows and they're like, look at this awesome store, how clean they keep it. So, well, I know that you're short on time. Well, maybe not short on time, but I know that we don't have endless time for today's discussion.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back, though, while we have a little time left, to the question of the two parties, which um, you're part of that system. And I was wondering how you are able to participate in that, given that, I mean, we've seen how the parties operate, certainly at the federal level, where they say there are two different parties, but really they're doing the same things. And like I was saying, and as we all know, they're making deals in the back room. And the parties don't really mean that much compared to how the picture that's painted. We have our rhinos and everything. So I was wondering how that works for you as someone who's participating directly in that system. And as a Republican in your case, you're in the minority. How I'm not even sure exactly how to ask the question that I want to ask.
Well,
But maybe,
there is no good answer. So your foggy question is just fine, because
okay.
it's a problem. It's a problem. What we have is we have people who are more interested in bringing home the bacon than protecting your bacon.
Yeah.
Your wallet, your property, your rights, your liberties, your freedom is what we as representatives should be protecting. I'm here to protect your bacon. And they have flipped this entire idea so that they want to bring home the bacon. Oh, here's some money. Here's a solar array. Here's a wind farm. Here's a subsidy. Here's a grant program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they are so busy trying to milk the system because of the fiat currency and the fake money that's getting printed faster than you and I can count.
Yeah.
They're printing that money, they're flushing it into state government, they're flushing it into county government, they're flushing it into municipalities. They've got, the COVID boondoggle was $1.6 trillion and everybody's trying to spend it. And therefore it's this super dangerous moral hazard. Are you going to go for the money? Or are you going to protect your citizens' rights? And that's the dividing line. And we have Republicans who are fighting in that direction, and other Republicans who say, hey, I'm going to just bring home the money. Everybody applauds when I bring home the fake money.
Yeah.
And this is the tragedy in front of us is this this loss of duty and responsibility to the individual, their rights, their independence and their freedom, their liberty is what we should be fighting for. And so it happens, Democrats lean more towards stealing your liberty, Republicans less so, but they'll go for the corporate greed.
Yeah.
And then you only have a handful of Republicans that recognize the value of self-government self-governance as a model and republicanism as the answer to this conflicting top-down totalitarian regime that we face today.
Okay, then that's what you're dealing with. And you're also dealing with trying to embody what was originally outlined by our founding fathers, that representatives were the idea then, when it was farmers, really, they were,
Right.
right? You were going to
Yeah.
come in and serve for briefly and then go back to your farm. And so for you to try to embody those values, but in this system the way it is now, that's a really tricky line that you're walking. And I just want to express my appreciation for your commitment to that, because I can see clearly that,
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks. This is a way to, get me back. You keep, clapping for me. I'll come back again and again.
right. We all love that. We all love a little applause and appreciation. Well, I think there's hope in a lot of different ways, or we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Things are really changing, and we don't want them to change back, because we want them to change forward. They can't change back. Nothing can go backwards. And the thing is that ideal that was written up by our founding fathers, and I always say they had good women behind them,
Oh, yeah.
was never really embodied. We haven't had it yet. The
Right.
American experiment is still an experiment. We haven't manifested it yet. So it's not that we want to go back to something, because it never did happen. It was just outlined. So we need to, well, I don't like to say what we need to do, but what it looks to me like would be a good idea to do would be to fill out those outlines. And one of the key things that has to happen, I don't see the party system dissolving anytime soon, although that's my wish, because I think that Madison was right when he said that would just be factiousness. But we also are seeing different forms. The fiat money isn't going to last long, and that is another thing that Madison and all of them pointed to. Paper money, fiat money, is the destruction of an economy and a society and a country. Really, it's the borders and also the money, right, that
Right.
makes the country a country. And we have more decentralized forms of money coming in, and this is a huge change. And maybe we'll get to talk about this at another time, because I have
Yeah.
hope. That's one of the areas of hope.
Right, right. Well, this is why we're in this battle. Is we have hope for a brighter future where people can control their own lives and livelihood and pursue their skill set, whatever that might look like, in whichever way they can. And the gamut is really from double A to double Z. I mean, the whole thing is out there. What is it that your skill set allows you to do and do successfully? And we should get back to that kind of free market thinking, and we should quit relying on a government contract to provide the money that we're going to use to live our lives.
That's right. And I think there needs to be the freedom to fail. That's part of the
Yeah,
free market and part of our free participation. You're going to fail
right.
sometimes, it's just the way it is. You're going to succeed and you're going to fail.
Yeah,
And that's, the socialist ideal is that there is no failure, but there's also no success. So there's this terrible suppression. And
right.
so, yeah. Well,
That's a
I
great
love.
that's a great place to leave this. I've got to go, and that socialist mantra that says nobody's better than you also means we've eliminated the hierarchy here. There's nobody worse than you either. So you get pushed down to the bottom level, and everybody's groveling at the same lower level, and
Yes.
there's never any real success. Socialism doesn't have success stories. They
No.
and the free market economy does. Capitalism does. Unfortunately, we've seen that get corrupted, and now the capitalists are just money grubbers because the federal government or state governments, lolling out, dollars that were printed in the basement last week. And we've got criminal activity on either side of the fence. And people I think this is a good discussion for people to come to grips with what's really going on. Think deeply about it, and then we can concentrate on how to fix it.
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful to speak with you, and I know we're going to get another chance to speak again. There's so many topics we could cover, but for today, we approach the whole democracy versus constitutional republic, and I really appreciate you taking the time to explore this with me and, give our listeners a chance to think about it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what people have to say about this episode on Seeds of Liberty, right?
Yes, the Seeds of Liberty. Okay, well, good luck in Salem, Oregon. We appreciate the work that you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Great
All right.
conversation. See ya.
See you soon. Another great discussion with Senator Linthicum. I really enjoy our rapport. Please do like and share and subscribe and comment and come on back for more. We're going to explore further, and my Uncle Robbie's going to be helping out. That was Senator Dennis Linthicum. I'm Carrington McDuffie. This is Star Seeds of Freedom.